This episode is sponsored by Ellie.
Ellie is one of the world's leading online content providers for English teachers.
If you're looking for relevant, ready-made materials to get your students talking, head over to ellie.com today.
That's ELLII.com.
Hello and welcome to the Teacher Think-Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Anna.
And I'm Shé. And today we're touching on a topic that feels particularly relevant, critical thinking and the pervasive presence of algorithms in our daily lives.
As English language educators, we already are adept at teaching language and communication. But in an age where algorithms deeply influence information flow and decision-making processes, it becomes paramount to integrate critical thinking into our lessons, too.
Algorithms are essentially systems that decide what content appears in our feeds based on how we behave and engage online. And they now underpin much of the digital world and affect countless aspects of our everyday lives. Everything from search engine results and social media feeds to e-commerce suggestions.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, really. It's never been more important for our students to not only understand language, but to critically assess the sources and motivations behind the information they encounter.
Absolutely. And that's really what today's conversation is all about. How are we ensuring that we're looking critically at our information consumption and that our students are doing the same?
Let's meet our guests for today and break the ice.
My name is Andrea Collados. You can call me Andy. My pronoun is she. And I'm a global educator and ESL teacher. So I've been teaching English for more than 20 years across the globe, 5 continents, 7 different countries. I'm digital nomad and been volunteering abroad, traveling a lot. English teaching and education in general is my passion.
Well, if you've listened to any of our episodes, you know that we have a surprise icebreaker question for you today.
Okay, lovely. I'm ready for that.
So I'd love to know,
All right.
Andrea, which do you trust more to recommend a book, an algorithm or a colleague? And why?
That's a good question. A little bit of both, depending on the colleague. I think I would go for several recommendations, like several people. And depending also what kind of book I want to read and my mood, the moment, you have moments for certain books. And I would use AI to see, okay, can you give me a review, a summary or, recommendations or pros and cons of reading this book, things like that.
Great. I love that hybrid approach. Not all colleagues you can trust to recommend good books.
Completely agree. What I love about Andrea's answer is that it wasn't anti-algorithm. It was more discerning. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such an important distinction. This episode isn't about rejecting technology, right? It's about interrogating it.
And modeling that interrogation for students, saying, I use this tool, but I don't outsource my judgment to it.
All of the other professions are the result of teaching. I think we have the responsibility of educating and molding people. I think it's really special. And in today's world that, as you know, technology and the development of AI is one of the biggest things nowadays. So basically, I think it's important to learn and to teach and develop critical thinking because we are in a world that is surrounded and we are bombarded by news. Most of the information we have is connected to this idea of fake news, this idea of misinformation. So I think as educator, it's our responsibility to help the students to discern what's fake and what's not.
Absolutely. It's something, we've had to deal with, especially over the last decade. There's been a real uptick in the need for discernment and looking at news critically. I mean, we should have always been doing that, but it's just becoming more of a need now. I'm glad you addressed that responsibility.
Like you highlighted, Shé, I really want to pause on that word responsibility for a second.
Hmm.
Andrea isn't just talking about classroom practice here. She's talking about the ethical role we play as educators.
Yes. And I think that's uncomfortable for some teachers. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're trained to teach language, not truth discernment.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, language is the vehicle for misinformation, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And if our students are consuming information in English, then English class becomes one of the few spaces where they can actually slow down and ask, who's saying this and why, which is already critical thinking before we ever name it as such.
As educators, the challenge lies in equipping our students with the ability to discern, doubt, and decide based on reasoned analysis rather than passive
Hmm.
acceptance.
Hmm.
And Anna, you and I have done a lot of thinking about media literacy together,
Hmm.
which is ultimately the root of what we're getting at here, media literacy. To foster critical thinking within the English language classroom, we have to develop strategies that encourage students to analyze texts, question narratives, and understand different perspectives.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Shay. And we presented right on this topic at TESOL Portland. I
Hmm.
think that was the one, right? And we
Yep.
even have a few episodes on media literacy. The first one we did, episode 39, focused on evaluating our biases when it comes to consuming media and the importance of perspective taking within that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then we also published episode 41, which was kind of a continuation of episode
Hmm.
39, where we looked at misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda and conspiracy theories.
Hmm. Yeah. So we didn't get into all of these challenges during our conversation with Andrea, but we have linked these episodes in the show notes, listeners, and we may drop a clip or two in this episode if it's appropriate.
Let's dive into our topic for today. You already alluded to it in your introduction, but you've spent a lot of time thinking about critical thinking. Critical thinking, as Shay noted before, has always been central to education. But
Mhm.
why do you think critical thinking takes on new urgency for teachers and learners of English today?
Well, first of all, we need to think about what thinking critically is. For this, I would like to share an example. We have two friends who are discussing about starting the gym, well, I need to get some new clothes, new trainers, this color, this brand, this size, etc. And after the discussion, one of them checks their social media, and then the first thing they see is an ad promoting this specific sneaker, this color, this size, this brand, etc. So in this case, thinking and critically would be just saying, this is a sign from the universe. I need to buy these sneakers.
Hmm.
But as a critical thinker, you understand it's basically algorithm. And yes, we are being heard and being watched all the time. That's why you see those ads after a conversation. The key enemies of critical thinking are, well, one of them is lack of time. We don't have enough time to double check the information. We don't have the habit. Sometimes people don't know how to do it. Other important enemies are biases and prejudice. And also, we are overwhelmed by this load of information. The world tend to be very polarized, and it's difficult to handle all that information that is so different and so contrasting and so opposing. I think that's why it's urgent, it's important to start developing this skill because it's essential.
And you also mentioned targeted ads earlier. In addition to just the sea of information we have, we're receiving information that is specifically tailored to us, right?
Hmm.
Exactly. Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. This is one of the biggest problems we face with the algorithm. You
Hmm.
know, we have this misinformation, we have this fake news, and we, without realizing, tend to or can get trapped in echo chambers. I guess you are familiar with the term echo chambers,
Hmm.
but this concept, what you see in the news feed, sounds exactly the same as what you think.
Hmm.
But it's basically because the computer calculates exactly what you need. If we search on Google about global warming, you are going to get totally different information as I do,
Hmm.
because we are
Hmm.
located in different parts of the world
Hmm.
and the information we search is different.
Absolutely.
So our algorithm is tailored according to what we do and what we search, etc. And there is this false sense that this is for our benefit, it's something good. And it's quite the opposite, because then you are trapped in a bubble and you cannot see other perspectives, other visions, other ways of thinking. And then you are just in that loop of thinking the same and doing the same thing over and over again.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that people don't spend time thinking critically about what they're consuming. The echo chambers that we're all existing in online feed into our belief that, well, I'm right because everything I'm reading is in agreement with me. It's confirmation bias.
I'm so glad you brought up confirmation bias in our conversation with Andrea. That's really what she's talking about, right? These echo chambers where our beliefs are reinforced over and over again, and we don't think critically about what we see because it already agrees with what we think.
Right. And I think this is where teachers sometimes underestimate the impact that they can have on students. The classroom might be the only place where students are actually exposed to perspectives that don't match their algorithmic bubble. So, we spend quite a bit of time on this idea in Media Literacy 101. That's episode 39. Let's hear a little.
A lot of bias, is really unconscious. We might think that it's objective, but it's really hard to see from the perspectives of others. Totally. And it doesn't help that the way people receive news these days, which is through their social media, what they see is already curated to match what they like.
Filter bubbles.
Exactly. The algorithm chooses what they'll respond to most positively. And so someone who already agrees with what they're reading is going to see it and say, oh, that's objective. That's objective fact. So our bias plays into how we read something, right? And how we read something that has a perspective different from ours as well.
Yeah.
Because we're going to look at it and say, well, that doesn't fit with my worldview. Therefore, it's biased, but I'm not biased, right?
Right. No, it's wrong. It's easy to spot biases within others, or so we think, but it's hard for us to notice them within ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
There are all sorts of different kinds of bias, which I don't think we'll get into in this episode. We don't have time for that. But yeah, that confirmation bias is huge, and it really has immense impacts on discourse. So we want teachers to recognize, there's such importance in unpacking this with your students. And I think that we have to start with ourselves, right? Consider how our lived experience has shaped how we see the world and how we see others, and use that as the jumping off point for critical thought around the topic of bias and also just media literacy.
Wow. We were saying this in 2023 when the episode first came out, but it feels so much more salient now as our social media feeds have gotten even more polarized.
Yeah, this is a great overview of what confirmation bias is, if I can say so myself. So what else do we need to know about how algorithms shape student thinking and language use?
Algorithm usually works with a recommendation system. You can find countless platforms that facilitate the spread of manipulated narrative. And I think students, especially adolescents, they are the ones that are more exposed to that and more vulnerable and manipulated, depending on the relationship they have with the family and, if the parents concern and they take actions in terms of using social media. But, fake news usually spreads easily, faster than real news. And misinformation is usually more profitable. That's why it's so easy to get in that situation. The problem with AI is that the AI cannot discern what's right from wrong. And that's why helping the students to develop their critical thinking, it's so essential. I mean, I use AI, I use social media, and I think this is our world today. We are having a life with these tools, and I think it's important to use them, but to use them and not be used by them. And this is what we need to tell our students, that they need to be smart enough to use all of the tools, but not be used by them. If they get some information, they need to think first logically if that makes sense. If something rings a bell, to double check, look for other sources. Like social media could be those kind of media that you get fast information. But if you want to get deep information, if you're going to get information and get the root of that, you need to search more. You need to search deeply, go to other websites, go to books. Visiting the library is one of the best hobbies that we can have, but it shouldn't be a hobby, but nowadays it's usually a hobby. But your best trip should be, to the library to find a space for you to think.
Yeah, I love your emphasis on deep information. When I think of the word algorithm, I think of my Instagram feed. I'm getting all of this content and I'm 100% guilty of just seeing what the algorithm gives me and then saying, huh, that's interesting, and not deepening my understanding of something and leaving it at that and taking it as fact. Usually it's low stakes things that I'll leave at that, but it's very easy to leave it there. There is a big vulnerability, especially if you haven't developed the skills to question things, especially things that are important.
Yes, the danger is most people use social media to relax. They see what they see in their newsfeed because they don't want to think. They want to just relax. The danger there is that they believe that, and sometimes it's not entirely true. The point with fake news is that when the real news comes up, then it's too late. No one cares. Some people still have the fake news in their head. This is one of the big dangers. You're tired, you want to relax, so you see your newsfeed. Well, my newsfeed is all about cats, which is
I like you.
which is also a problem because life is not all about cats. But yeah,
well, arguable. I think it's all about cats, but sorry, I'm completely derailing our conversation.
Yes, I was going to say that this ties back into what you mentioned earlier, Andrea, about the polarization that we see happening in places all over the world. You're in Argentina, we're in the US. People using social media as their primary source of research, that is, I think, in big part what has gotten us to the place where we are. And, this idea of critical thinking is not something that just needs to be instilled in our students in our classroom. This really is the responsibility of all functioning humans.
Yes, definitely. And also we have this culture of hate and violence that is part of social media. And unfortunately, we see that coming from leaders, world leaders. And this is the danger because people get this message. And when there's violence and hate, there is no option.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think people are really tired, right? And, they, after a long work day, like you said, they just want to zone out, look at their cats. That sounds more enticing than reading the news, right? We weren't designed to absorb as much information as we have to now, right? Like when we were hunters and gatherers, we cared for our local community. We knew about the people who lived in our neighborhood, and that was it. But now we know about everything everywhere if we want to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we've established a really clear issue here. But teachers are also tired. In English language classrooms, we're trying to teach grammar, vocabulary, fluency, reading, writing, everything. How can we make space for this in the English language classroom? How can teachers weave critical thinking into their lessons without overwhelming students, without deviating from their curriculum so much, making so much more work for them to create more materials? Do you have any recommendations?
First, you have to start from the point that critical thinking is a practical discipline. So we need to practice, and it should be incorporated in our lives as a daily routine. Basically, it's a process that is interactive. There should be active participation from teachers and from students. As a teacher, I intend to be an example. Okay. I did this activity as a warm-up with my students. This is a quiz about real or fake news. So basically what you have is a picture and some explanation about the picture, and they have to guess if it is real or fake. And we did that with a couple of pictures, and this is just a brief activity, and they are thinking critically because you have to analyze the photo and explain why for them it's real or it's fake. Because it is AI generated, And how do you notice that? Do you see something weird in the photo? Or, well, many of them basically explain that, yeah, I think the photo is real, but not in the place where it said that it's located, in a different place. And that was true. In many cases, the photo was real, but in a different place or in a or different time. This is critical thinking. And it's just a warm up. Then you can continue with the rest, and it's not overwhelming.
We like to focus on practical takeaways for teachers. And, as you're sharing these ideas, I'm just thinking, even asking questions like why and how is a really good starting place. Like, we don't want to overwhelm our students and say, like, today we're drilling down on critical thinking. And we certainly don't want to overwhelm our very busy teachers either. But just starting with, how you're framing a question and ensuring that you're really digging deep and asking students to explain, their rationale, having them explain their thinking. That is sort of an inroad for developing those critical thinking skills.
Yes, definitely. And especially for young adults and for adolescents, if you use social media, you get them motivated. That's for sure. And so you can use any random photo, like a photo on Instagram, photo from a famous person or one of them. Or, it doesn't matter. And then just asking questions like, why is this person posting this photo? What does he or she want to show? Look at their faces, their body language. What is the person trying to do? Is he or she selling something? What's the purpose? What about the message, the comments? Why are the people commenting this or saying that? You can not only develop and help them develop critical thinking, but also discuss other topics, like we don't talk about people's bodies, comments that are racist are not really nice, etc. So you can cover a lot of topics in a few minutes. It doesn't have to be the whole hour.
I like your focus on having it be just a small chunk of your lesson. It doesn't have to take over everything. And maybe you can find ways to just integrate that critical element into the activities you're already planning by asking more questions, right? But also just the questions you were asking right now, those all prompt so much language, so much language production. There's so many different proficiency levels that could be represented in these questions depending on how you frame them, right? You can have some very simple, straightforward, descriptive language, describe the image. And then you have like, what do you think the purpose is, which is a much more difficult question to express, but you can break it down into smaller language chunks. It could be yes or no questions to keep it simple, So
Bloom's
I mean, that
taxonomy,
helps
baby.
me. Yeah, Bloom's taxonomy, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes, and also if you want to go even deeper and do something more elaborated with your students, you can, for example, plan a speaking activity where they discuss a topic like global warming and ask them to take sides and then exchange sides. So they can be for or against, but then they have to change that. Or you can ask them, this is an activity that could be, for homework, write an essay about something using fake news, fake information, fallacies. Then ask them to post it on a forum and the other students can comment on that and reply and, try to basically provide proof and reasoning why this is a fallacy, how to debunk this fallacy, etc. So there are some activities that you can do that are really interesting and that can help them be aware of misinformation, fake news, etc.
Ooh, fake news. We spent a lot of time on this in Media Literacy 102 or episode 41. Let's hear it.
So let's start with the terms misinformation and disinformation. These are two words we've probably all heard a lot about because it's just been so pervasive. So what are they?
Totally. The term fake news is everywhere. It's so politically charged. So it's not our preferred term for discussing these ideas, but it is related to these concepts of misinformation and disinformation in that there's some sort of false information involved in both of these concepts.
Yeah.
But misinformation, the big key difference here is that misinformation is not necessarily intentional and disinformation is intentional.
Right. Disinformation is created and disseminated to manipulate, Whereas misinformation is kind of just a misrepresentation of something, which is also very problematic, right? But so commonplace too. We all kind of participate in it, honestly.
Yeah. Have you ever just clicked share on something that you saw? But you're maybe not intentionally trying to mislead someone, but sometimes you click and share and you haven't done your due diligence and you may be sharing something that isn't correct.
Wow, 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 wow. Again, all of this feels so much more important to be aware of in today's news and social media cycle. It's so hard not to repeat what we've heard online without following up and verifying the source of information.
Definitely recommend checking out those 2 episodes. We shared a few really good frameworks you can use with your students to analyze the news and verify information.
We've linked in the show notes, listeners. And speaking of frameworks to use with students, let's see what else Andrea recommends doing in the classroom.
There are people who think that we cannot discuss about any topic in the classroom, like you cannot discuss politics, religion, etc. I don't agree with that. I think we can discuss anything in a respectful way and always providing reasoning, always providing proof and, backing your ideas, your thoughts. And working with students and making them, for example, looking for information on social media is very motivating and engaging for them. So they can look for information in social media about elections, then ask them to search other websites or Facebook book groups where they can find the opposite information. Analyze them. One topic that is also very important nowadays is migration. So think about the country's policies in terms of migration and think about it as a citizen of X country. Then think about it as a migrant coming from Africa, for example, to name a continent, or you're coming from Latin America as a migrant. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Empathize. Empathy is the key for critical thinking. So think as if you were a migrant. How would you feel? What would you do? I mean, unfortunately, we see videos and photos of people dragged from their houses by police in a violent way. This is inhumane. So, and I think we should, as teacher, this is our responsibility. We have to talk about this with our students. I think that is a very good exercise, and you can do it with any topic.
Yeah. And looking locally, looking around you and, noticing some of the challenges that are happening currently. What are some ideas students need to be exposed to? How can we make them see that empathizing, trying to imagine other people's lives is a really helpful skill to have in life, right?
This is where critical thinking and social emotional learning really intersect.
Yeah. Empathy isn't separate from analysis. It actually helps to deepen it. And language classrooms are uniquely suited for this kind of perspective taking.
And we talk about this pretty extensively in episode 39.
We're just going to put that in there again.
Shove it in your face. Yeah.
Our episodes are a great place to start thinking about media literacy. Andrea also had some additional resources to recommend.
There is a very interesting documentary about all of this on social media called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've had the chance to watch it.
I haven't, but I've heard of it. The Social Dilemma. Yeah.
Yeah, basically they're discussing about all of this, about algorithm and AI. It's worth watching. A book that I recommend is called Teaching Critical Thinking by Bell Hooks. And basically talks about mindful thinking, that is thinking about thinking, which is something we should exercise and we should incorporate in our daily routines. Taking time for ourselves, for our thinking, away from technology, having this digital Sabbath. And yes, taking time to connect with our essence, our people, to connect with our surrounding, our environment. I think that's essential. We need time to stay connected with this world of technology. Other recommendations in terms of movies, The Truman Show is a good movie, which is old, but good.
Yeah.
And then a couple of books that are classics from all times, 1984 and Brave New World. Those are must read that I highly recommend. And during our lessons with our students, we can think about how dystopian books written so long ago can relate so much with our reality.
These are such
Critical thinking
classics.
hurts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the recommendations, and
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on critical thinking in the age of the algorithm today. I think it is so essential in today's day and age, and it really does behoove us all as teachers to find ways to integrate that into our teaching.
Oh, so this topic is a bit of a doozy. But I'm feeling empowered. It was really nice to come back to this topic with you after a few years.
And in just a few years, so much has changed. And also, nothing has changed at all.
Yeah.
Aw.
Rough moment. So, teachers, we're curious how you're feeling and navigating this wild online world we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
How are you ensuring that you're looking critically at your information consumption and that of your students?
You can share with us in a comment on social media or email us at teacherthinkaloud@gmail.com. We welcome your reflections, questions, and ideas.
Be sure, just one more time, I'm going to say, be sure to check out our show notes where we linked a bunch of goodies for you as you think through these reflection questions and next steps.
Yeah, we're right there with you.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. And until next time, friends, happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.